What is the creepiest, most unexplained thing you have ever experienced? When my brother and I were around 4 or 5, we lived in a house that was about 100 years old. One day we were walking up the stairs when we saw a tall man in a black coat and top hat walk into the living room, which was to the left of the bottom of the stairs. A bit freaked out, we thought our dad was pranking us, so called out for him. Crap. Both parents came out of the kitchen, opposite side of the stairs, and isolated from the living room. I hadn't thought about it for a long time, and we never spoke about it. Then about a month ago, my daughter asked if I believed in ghosts, so I told her the story. Literally seconds later my phone bleeps. It was my brother saying I was just talking to partner about paranormal crap. Do you remember that guy in the top hat? This was eventually explained, but definitely fits the criteria for creepiest experience. When I was about 7 or 8, I was laying in bed trying to sleep through a brutal thunderstorm. I was the only person sleeping on the second story of a 150-year-old farmhouse. The house creaked and settled and was thoroughly terrifying to me as a child, so much that I usually slept with the lights on. I just knew there were legions of ghosts and monsters ready to attack me. So this thunderstorm wasn't doing anything for my nerves. I finally got to sleep, but was awakened by deafening thunder. I looked up to see the wall near the foot of my bed with blood streaming down it. All the nightmares were coming true. The problem was, I wasn't allowed to leave my bedroom. My parents had gotten tired of hearing that I was scared. So I laid there all night watching the blood drip down from the ceiling, paralyzed with fear. Finally morning came and I went barreling out of the room to get my parents. I pictured one of those moments like in IT where only I can see the blood, but no, my parents could see it too. It turns out that after 100 or so years, the dark red bricks of the chimney were dissolving, and the dust from them formed a sludge in the rain. I got a phone call around 2 a.m. from a private number. I answered it and a low voice told me they needed help, and was on the bathroom floor too sick to move. I thought it was my brother, so I rushed over to his house and he had no clue what I was talking about. We then both called all the rest of our family to try to find who needed help. No one did. I hope whoever called me that night got the help they needed. My patient died on the wing I work on. She was terminal but not expected to go immediately. She was going to a facility with hospice, after a fairly long battle with cancer. She was scheduled to go early the next morning. Husband had plans on meeting her there. Everything was set up. She was in good spirits. Her assessment was fine. Took her medications and said she was going to watch the news then take a nap. An hour later I go to check on her. I'm quietly checking her IV, making sure her stuff is in reach, move her table and then notice she was gone. Sitting up, holding onto the side rail. She honestly looked like she was sleeping, but no heartbeat and no respirations. Most of the time when people expire their mouth drops open and it's very obvious. With her, nope. I had to call a coworker to confirm. I was expecting a wake up, but she was gone. Attempted to contact her husband who I couldn't reach and started the paperwork, in addition to attending to my other patients. Few minutes later, I'm by the central desk and someone asks, "Where were you?" And I told them I was giving medication down the hall. I see 2 of the other nurses exchange looks, but nurses are weird and since they didn't elaborate I continue on my nightly duties. I'm at the very end of the hall doing some patient education and the charge nurses comes and gets me. I assume the husband is calling back, but that wasn't the case. Apparently, as I have been caring for my other patients at the opposite end of the ward, there have been phone calls coming out of the deceased patient's room to the central station. Several of them, no answer, just breathing. I mean, this is to be a prank, right? Phone rings, I look and see the patient's room number on caller ID. I walk in the room. Phone is neatly on the bedside table, TV is off, and the deceased patient looks like she is napping. I check the bathroom, it's empty. I'm going to leave the door open, halfway, I say as I leave the room. No more phone calls. But the next hour, alarms go off in empty rooms, call lights come on for patients that can't move, an important piece of equipment died. And the dementia patient keeps complaining about the other patient that keeps coming into her room, loosely fitting the description of the deceased. Husband finally comes to the unit, because he knew why I was calling. He spends a few minutes with her, and when he comes out of the room he finds me and says, "She told me this morning she didn't ever want to go to a nursing home." Well, I guess she meant it. After that, everything returned to normal. Well, normal as far as hospitals go. When I was around 5 years old, I woke up and saw a glowing white man-like silhouette pacing back and forth down the hallway, but kind of gliding. Freaked me the duck out, and I thought I was having a nightmare or something. I told my parents about it the next day, and my mom got a really weird look on her face. My brother had seen and told her about the exact same thing 2 weeks before, and I hadn't known about it. Still weirds me out. My house sitting story. 2 months after my brother and his wife bought a new house, they had to go out of town and needed their cats fed. Their house and my office are both a good drive from my apartment, but only a few minutes away from each other. My brother said if I wanted, I could just stay over in the guest room rather than driving among the 3 places. So I got the keys and instructions. I was staying there 3 nights, moan wet. Monday evening was uneventful until about midnight. I was lying on the living room couch, watching Conan, with a cat lying on my chest. I started to drift off to sleep. The next thing I knew, I was standing in pitch black darkness. I completely freaked out. I had no idea where I was. I felt around in the dark and felt nothing. Finally I realized there actually was a faint blue light coming from above. I moved toward it and then understood where I was. I was in the duking basement. The light was coming through the basement door at the top of the stairs, which leads to the kitchen. Just enough moonlight apparently made it through from a window elsewhere in the kitchen. I bolted up the stairs, turned on the kitchen light, and closed the basement door. I was terrified until I calmed down enough to come to the conclusion you probably already came to. I had sleepwalked all the way down the stairs after opening the basement door, which I know was closed. A couple things are important to the story. First, the basement. The house was very nice actually, more than they should have been able to afford. The only exception was the basement. I had only seen the basement once, when I first got the tour. It was totally unfinished and was the one major thing they wanted to fix up. All they had down there were some boxes and the washer-dryer. I had no reason to want to go down there and had kind of forgotten it existed. The other point is that sleepwalking is kind of a thing in my family, almost an inside joke. My brother talked in his sleep constantly, and would sleepwalk sometimes, and it always scared the hell out of me. The idea of people doing things in their sleep just creeps me out to the core, still does. My brother knew this and would tease me about it, so it was known in my family that I had this phobia. But as far as I know, I had never, ever sleepwalked until that night. The image kept playing in my mind, over and over, of me, asleep, getting up from the couch, walking to the kitchen, opening the basement door, and shuffling down the stairs into total darkness. Creepy as all hell. Anyway, I saw the TV was still on in the living room, playing Wedding Crashers. I watched the rest of the movie, trying to laugh and think of the sleepwalking as a funny story to tell my brother. When I went upstairs to go to sleep in the guest room, I stayed asleep. It was night 1. The next morning, in the light of day, it didn't seem that scary. I texted my brother about it and joked around. All day I wasn't bothered one bit. But as I'm walking out of my office to my car, I'm overcome with this sense of dread. All of a sudden, the thought of going to sleep in that house and maybe sleepwalking again is scaring me. So I had a plan. I stop at the hardware store and pick up one of those rubber door stopper wedges. At the house, I jam this into the crack under the basement door, and kick it in until it's as far as it can go. I test out trying to open the door, and it won't budge. Perfect. Later, I go upstairs and fall asleep. When I wake up, I swear to God I think I'm dreaming. I was standing in darkness again, but this time I know exactly where I am. The smell is the same. The concrete floor under my feet is the same. I look around for the light from upstairs, and it takes me longer to find it because it's farther away. Last night I was only a couple of feet from the stairs. This night it was maybe 10 feet. I run up and turn on the kitchen lights. I see the rubber wedge on the floor, a couple of feet away, as if tossed there. Again, I can't stop picturing myself sleepwalking. Out of the bedroom, down the stairs, trying to open the basement door. Bending down and yanking out the wedge. And then, again, slowly down into the darkness. I decided I was turning on the basement lights and they were staying on. I opened the door and flipped the switch to the basement stairway. I saw there was a main switch at the bottom of the stairs. To give you a quick sense of the layout, the staircase splits the basement into two parts. To the right is a small area with the washer-dryer, and to the left is a big open area. Anyway, I walked down and turned on the lights for the whole basement. That's when I noticed something I hadn't noticed when my brother gave me the tour. About 10-15 feet away, in the big area, there was a door to what looked like a small closet. This door was closed, but had no doorknob, just an empty hole, so it looked like it would freely swing open. I realized it was very close to where I had just awoken. Then a ducking freaky thought came to me. It was as if each night I was heading to the door, and getting a little farther each time before I woke up. As soon as that thought popped into my head, I booked it up the stairs again, left the lights on, and closed the door. I went up to the bedroom, but it took me forever to fall asleep. That was night 2. The next morning, Wednesday morning, I woke up late for work. I didn't think about the basement at all because I was scrambling to get ready. At work though, I was still curious about what was behind the door, so I texted my brother and asked. He replied, "Wait, why were you in the basement?" I realized that when I texted him the day before, I never actually told him where I woke up. So I tell him I woke up in the basement, actually twice in a row. After a while, he sends this novel-length text about how the basement is creepy, not to go down there, etc. How they tried putting the litter boxes in the basement and the cats made a mess in the house because they refused to go down. How he volunteers to do every chore other than the laundry so he doesn't have to go down there. He says all this stuff, and it's surprising to me, because my brother never believed in the paranormal or superstitions, ever since we were kids. I also realize he never answered my question about the door, but I let it go. After work, I get the same feeling of dread as I'm walking to my car. I really don't want to stay there again, and I decide, duck it, I don't have to. So I go feed the cats, get my stuff, and drive back to my place. I'm supposed to feed the cats one more time, so I'll stop over in the morning. As I went to sleep at my apartment, I was thinking of all the steps I would have to take to sleepwalk to the basement again, find my car parked around the block, drive asleep to my brother's house, etc. But this time, I sleep through the night. That was night 3. Thursday morning, I stop at the house as planned. I'm about to leave when I remember that the basement lights are still on. I don't even hesitate to go down to turn them off. There was something about being there in the morning that, at the time, made it seem fine. When I go down, again the door without a doorknob catches my eye, and it also doesn't seem scary anymore. So, what the hell, let's see. I walk over to it and I distinctly remember not feeling spooked at all. Until I reach my hand toward the doorknob hole to pull it open. As soon as I do that, and I mean instantly, I feel this electric feeling, like the air before a storm, and I imagine a hand coming through that hole and grabbing mine. It was like 0 to 60, going from no fear to being certain that something horrible would happen if I opened that door. It's hard to describe it other than that electric feeling. I booked it up the stairs and out of the house. So, a month later, I meet my brother for happy hour. A few drinks in, we start joking about me sleepwalking in the creepy basement. I say he never answered me about what's behind the door, and he says I don't want to know. Joking at first, but then insisting. Finally he tells me, and I don't believe him. He is my big brother and has only bullcrapped me about 1,000,000 times in my life. This was his explanation. The previous and first owners of the house had a teen daughter that used the basement as her bedroom. The door was to her closet, where one night she curled up, took some pills and killed herself. The family was going to remodel the basement, but after tearing it apart realized they couldn't do it and had to move. That was why only the basement was unfinished, and why my brother was able to afford the place. The seller had to disclose a suicide happened in the residence. He said if I didn't believe him, to look up the market values of the identical houses in his tract. I know how much they paid for their house and it was way lower. He and his wife considered themselves rational people and figured it was a bargain, but didn't want to tell anyone. After they moved in, his wife was fine with the basement, but he grew to hate it. He apologized for not saying anything to me before I stayed there, but he never thought I'd have any reason to go down there. Now here's what convinced me. I said, okay, the only thing that makes me kind of believe you is that the last morning I was there, I went over to the closet door, and at this point, I see my brother's face change, and I continued. When I went to open it, the air felt like, and at the same instant, I say electricity, and my brother says electric. At the same exact time. I saw his face and knew he was telling the truth. I've never stepped foot again in that basement, and I haven't sleepwalked since. Too long. Didn't read. House sitting alone at my brother's new house, sleepwalked into the basement and possibly felt the presence of a ghost.